1.3 is continuing our work with order of operations. Here are a couple of key vocabulary terms you need to know. Numerical expression is just an expression or a number sentence that contains only numbers and operations. And remember, operations could be add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And I'm going to close up that parentheses because I forgot. And then evaluate means just to simply find the value, or sometimes we say solve, other times we say find the answer. When we actually talk about the order of operations, some of you might remember what we call an acronym or the reminder, PEMDAS, because that tells us the order, but we are going to look at a couple of things that get overlooked pretty often. Most of you are already familiar with the P being for parentheses, so remember you want to do anything that is in parentheses first. Next, you're going to come to the E, and remember the E stands for exponents, so you want to find the value of numbers with exponents. The next step is the one that gets missed or done incorrectly a lot of times, because when we just look at PEMDAS, the word PEMDAS, we see the M come next, which we know means multiply, and then we see the D, which means divide. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when it comes to this step, if you have a number sentence or a numerical expression that has both multiplication and division in it, you have to make sure you do them in the order from left to right. So for instance, if a division were to come up first, in the order from left to right, then you would actually divide if there was a multiplication that came up second. And this is something that we'll practice, but make sure you kind of get that written down and that we get used to that, because it is an area that people make a lot of mistakes on. And the final two letters in the acronym PEMDAS are A and S, A standing for addition and S standing for subtraction. But just like we had up here in the multiply and divide line, once you get your numerical expression down to only adding and subtracting, you still have to go in order from left to right. So if there's a subtraction sign at the beginning of the numerical expression, and then addition towards the end, you actually would have to do the subtraction first. And again, we forget about that because the S comes last, so we think we have to do it last. But watch, because we'll try a couple of practice problems on this along the way. For example 1, using order of operations, we have letter A that says evaluate 12 minus 2 times 4. And in this case, we don't have any parentheses, we don't have any exponents, but we do have multiplication. So we have to make sure that we go ahead and tackle this part first. So we're going to write down the 12 because we're not doing anything with that, and we're going to also leave that subtraction sign alone, and we're going to say that 2 times 4 is 8. And we just keep working our way down the line as many steps as it takes until we get to something like this, where we have just one thing left to do. And in this case, it only took one line to get there. And then we just do 12 minus 8, which is 4. So the value of our expression is 4. Letter B says evaluate 7 plus 60 divided by, and then in parentheses 3 times 5. So this time we're going to remember to do the parentheses first, or what's inside the parentheses first, 3 times 5. And again, we're going to go ahead underneath and write down everything exactly the way it is if we're not using it. So we're not using the 7 plus 60 or the divided by right now. And then we're just going to change the 3 times 5 to equal 15, because that's what that is. Next, we're going to look and we'll notice that we have an addition and a division. And in our order of operations, division comes first. So 60 divided by 15 is 4. So we're going to leave the 7 and the plus alone. And then 60 divided by 15 is 4. So we're going to go ahead and write that down. And then 7 plus 4 equals 11. So that is the final value of our expression. Example 2 is very much like example 1, but this time we're going to go ahead and use order of operations with exponents too. And this time we're going to evaluate 30 divided by, and then in parentheses, 7 plus 2 to the third power, or sometimes we say 7 plus 2 cubed, and then times 6. And again, we have to do whatever's in parentheses first. So when we are writing this out, we're going to keep the 30 the same, the division the same, and then the times 6 at the end here is going to be the same. And we're just going to focus on this part that's in parentheses right now. And before we can really do the parentheses, though, we have to figure out what 2 to the third power is. And we're going to remember that 2 to the third power is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So basically what we have in the parentheses here is 7 plus 8. And then in our next step, we're going to go ahead and actually do 7 plus 8. So we still have 30 and divided by, and then 7 plus 8 is 15. And then still have that times 6 in there. And then we just look and we notice that we have 2 operation symbols left, division and multiplication. And this is one of those tiebreakers that I was just telling you about when we went through the order of operations earlier. And I said that even when we see the word PEMDAS a lot of times, and I'm going to write that off to the side, people use that so in order that they see the M come first and they assume that they have to multiply. But if you go back to that slide where I wrote all the steps out, remember that I put the M and the D on the same line because you have to do whichever comes first in order from left to right. And in this case, the division comes first. So you actually have to do 30 divided by 15, which is 2, and then times 6. And that is going to give us a total value of 12. So our final answer in this case is actually 12. Okay, here are a few on your own problems that I'd like you to try. There are 6 problems total, but I would especially like you to write down 1, 3, and 5 and give those a try. And then the answers will show up on the next screen. If you have time or you want extra practice, you're more than welcome to try 2, 4, and 6. The answers will also be on the next screen, but I'll leave it up to you as to whether you want to do 2, 4, and 6. You do need to do 1, 3, and 5 though, please. Example 3 is going to be using order of operations, and a little tip that we want you to know is that most of us already remember that the X and the dot mean multiply, but did you know that putting a number next to parentheses without an operation symbol also means multiply? An example of this is if you have a numerical expression like this where you've got the 3 right next to the parentheses with no sign in between, no operation symbol, then it actually means 3 times the parentheses 2 plus 7. So 3 times 2 plus 7. And you'll see that a lot more this year, so that's when you're going to want to get to be familiar with. Example 3a, evaluate 9 plus 7 times 5 minus 2. So we're going to keep the 9 plus 7, and remember that we do anything in parentheses first, so 5 minus 2 is 3, and we're going to put that 3 next to the 7, keeping it in the parentheses so that we remember to multiply. And since 7 times 3 is 21, then our next line should say 9 plus 21, and then 9 plus 21 equals 30, so our final value is 30. Example 3b says evaluate again, but this time it says 15 minus 4 times 6 plus 1 in parentheses divided by 2 to the second power, or 2 squared. And there's a lot going on in this one, but again, if you've been following along, you should just do it one step at a time. And the first thing we're going to tackle here is parentheses. So the 15 is going to stay the same, and the minus 4 is going to stay the same, and then the divided by 2 to the second power is going to stay the same, and the only thing you're going to focus on is doing the parentheses, which is 6 plus 1, and that equals 7. And then when you come down to your next line, you're going to have to take care of this exponent over here. So, again, keeping these the same, 15 minus 4 times 7 divided by 2 to the second power, and since 2 times 2 is 4, we're going to make that into a 4. And then as we start looking across, even though this parentheses is still here, remember there's nothing to actually do inside of it anymore. So we learned that if it's right next to another number, that it means multiply. And so in this case, I have one multiplication and one division. And since multiplying comes first in order from left to right, then I'm going to tackle that one first. So since 4 times 7 is 28, I'm going to put that in there. And then keep the divided by 4 here. And then I still have to get rid of that division before I can do anything else. So 15 minus, and then 28 divided by 4 is 7. And then that takes us down to that final step of 15 minus 7, which is 8. And that is our final value. This time for practice, we're actually going to do the work right out of Big Green, and you're going to be looking at page 20, and you're going to have to be careful. So I encourage you to write all these problems down across the top of your page, because you're going to do 3 through 7, but just the odd ones, so 3, 5, 7. You are going to do number 8, and then you're also going to do 9 through 19, again, odds only, and then you're going to do 24 and 25. So that should only be a total of 12 problems. And remember, you're going to show all this work in your math notebook on a blank piece of paper in case we tear it out. So don't put it on the back of your notes or anything like that. And I'll help you set it up this first time around.